Hey, welcome. Just a few minutes ago, I was spending some time with my 18-year-old son, saying goodbye to him as he loads up his car and he heads back to school out of state. And I'm not going to see him for another 4 or 5 months or so. And it made me think about that period of my life, 18, long time ago, over 30 years ago, when I loaded up my car. I'm so full that I could barely see out the windows and I couldn't hear the stereo because my stuff was packed all around it, and I headed out of state to make a new life for myself. And I wondered, if I could go back in time, what sort of advice would I give 18-year-old me? And what sort of advice would I give teenagers living today? And so I thought about 7 things that I really wish that I would have known. I really wish somebody would have told me. And so I'm just going to go ahead and tell them to you today. First piece of advice that I would give 18-year-old me and I would give teenagers today is to do the hard stuff. You know, the greatest rewards in life come from doing the hard stuff. Great rewards generally don't follow easy lives. Great rewards don't generally follow laziness. But when we do the hard work in advance, it sets us up for success. Let me give you an example. I got married young. My wife and I, she was 19, I was 21. By all cultural standards, we were not set up for success. In fact, some of my friends even told me after we'd been married for 5-10 years that they didn't think that we would make it, that we were too young to get married. And, you know, they were probably right. We were probably too young to get married. But we decided during our engagement period that we were going to do the hard stuff. We were going to do all the hard work. And we read books. Boy, did we ever read books on relationships. We went to premarital counseling. In fact, each of us went to separate counselors in addition to premarital counseling so that we can do some healing work and come into our marriage whole people. It was a lot of hard work before we got married and after we got married. Even now, 30 years later, we're still reading books. We're still doing the hard work. But it's our hard work that we put into it that has set us up to succeed, to be married for 30 years, to still love each other, and to look forward for another 30 years. So we did the hard stuff, and we continue to do the hard stuff, and it has paid dividends in our relationship. So when you think about the life that you really want, ask yourself, what's the hard work that I need to do? What's that notebook and pen work that I need to do, that time that I need to go away for a day or two and really think and spend time concentrating? Do the hard stuff and you'll experience the success that you see others experience, and you say, I wish that I had that. The next piece of advice that I would give teenagers and give 18-year-old me is to learn financial literacy. One of the most important things that you can do with your life is to learn personal finance, financial literacy. Despite what we might think, it doesn't come naturally. If financial literacy came naturally, then you know what? Everyone would have lots of money saved up. Everyone would not be worried about retirement. Everyone would have their financial desires. Now, for me, I actually didn't learn financial literacy till I was almost 40 years old. And there I was with 3 children. I'm married and I don't have any money in savings. I didn't have anything put away towards retirement. I drove an old beater and I was renting some janky old house in a neighborhood I didn't want to live in. And so I decided that year I was going to read 2 books. I read I'll Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. And I know he wrote that book for people much younger than me, but I needed to learn that stuff. And I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And just learning some basic financial literacy principles, in a year, I went from nothing in savings to having a $10,000 emergency fund to having money saved to put a down payment on a house. I had started a retirement account, and I was moving in out of that neighborhood. And the thing is in that year, I didn't earn any more money than I did the previous year. I just learned how to handle what I had. And so if I could go back and tell 18-year-old me to learn financial literacy during that time and to practice those things, I would be much better off today than I am now. Now, the great thing is we've made it a priority, my wife and I, to teach our sons financial literacy, and they already at 18 and 22 and 24 have retirement accounts that are growing. They have money in savings. They don't have to worry about anything. So learn financial literacy. The third piece of advice I would go back and give myself is to sweat the small stuff. Now, I know that's kind of counterintuitive because you've probably heard the phrase, don't sweat the small stuff. But it's actually important that we do sweat the small stuff. It actually does make a difference when we make the bed, when we dress for the occasion, when we clean up after ourselves. We might think, oh, I'm just 2 minutes late for work or 3 minutes late for work, but our boss notices. I remember years ago when I was still in my 20s, I was working at a television station and I would be 3-4 minutes late for work. Some days I usually showed up for work and whatever graphic tee I pulled out of the hamper or out of my drawer, and I wasn't very detail oriented. And I remember one time I was talking to another guy that was working there who had come on to the TV station almost a year after I did. And I found out that he had received several raises in his time there, and I hadn't received one. Well, of course, I went back to my boss and I said, why are you paying him more than you're paying me? I've been here longer. And his answer was quite enlightening. He said, that guy is more detail oriented and he's here 15 minutes early every day. And look how his shirt is tucked in. And so the expression, the devil is in the details, really is true. Sweat the small stuff. Take care of the details. Do the small things in life that you might think don't matter, but they really do. Number 4 is feed your faith. And I would definitely go back and tell my 18-year-old self that, and I would tell any teenager that. Now, I don't know what your faith is, but I happen to be a Christian. And for what that looks like to me, for feeding my faith, is I read the Bible and I spend time in prayer. And so the important thing to realize is we might not think that we need to feed our faith right now. Life is great, but hard times come. They really, really, really do come. If there's one guarantee I can give you about life, is that life is hard and hard times come. And so when we go through those difficult times, it's our faith that gives us solid footing to stand on. Now, if you've ever seen a storm shelter or even a bomb shelter, one of these things that are sort of underground, and that's where you run into when the storms come, and they're built really solidly. Well, you don't build a storm shelter in the middle of a storm. What you do is you build a storm shelter when the weather's nice, because you never know when the storm is going to come. And the same goes for our faith. We don't wait until there's catastrophe in our lives. We don't wait until we're in crisis, and then we feed our faith, and then we read the Bible, and then we're in prayer and things like that. No, we feed our faith during the good seasons of life and the bad seasons, and it helps to carry us through when those difficult times come. The 5th piece of advice that I would give my 18-year-old self is to never stop learning. I met a guy one time that was in the military, and he talked about when he was in the military, he had to march all the time and always had to exercise. He had calisthenics, was always, there was always that PT, that physical training aspect of it. And when he was in the military, he was ripped. He was in great shape. He was strong. He was fast. But as soon as he got out of the military, he was of the mindset that I just spent the last 4 years exercising every day. I'm going to take a break. Well, that short break from exercising turned into months, turned into years, and now here he was, morbidly obese. And it was because he decided he was going to take a break. He was going to stop. And it affected his body in a terribly negative way, and he was chronically ill. And I think we do that sometimes with our brains, with our intellect. We think, I'm done with school, finally 4 years of college are over, or I've got my degree, or whatever it is, and we decide to take a break and we never get back into that routine of learning. But it's the learning and the growing that helps us to have the life that we've always wanted. And so I would encourage 18-year-old me to always be reading a book. Pick 12, 15 books that you want to read in a year. Always be listening to some sort of podcast or something that will help me to grow, that will help me to learn, that will help me to expand my intellect. And not only does learning help us to have a better life because we learn things about our health, or we learn things about finance, or we learn things about our career, or just the way the world works, but learning also just makes us more interesting people and facilitates more interesting conversations and makes life more interesting. So keep learning, keep reading, keep going on, and never stop. In fact, I hope that when you are in your last days, that there's a book on your nightstand. I'm pretty sure there will be one for me. Now, number 6 is important because my 18-year-old son actually gave it to me. I told him just before he was leaving that I was going to be making a YouTube video about advice to give teenagers today and my previous 18-year-old self. And he said, be consistent. And it's so true, because anyone can be a hero for 30 minutes. Anyone can make a grand declaration. Anybody can say that they quit this detrimental habit, or they, are going to engage in this new enterprise and do it for a day. But it's not our grand declarations that make us great. It's our consistency. It's our consistency that characterizes us. The people that we know are generous people, we don't think that they're generous because they were generous one time. We know that they're generous because they're generous consistently. The same thing with kind people. The same thing with loving people, with compassionate people, with strong people. It's consistency. The same thing with exercise. Now, I don't know about you, but I really wish that I could go to the gym and work out for an hour and just get an amazing pump and then never have to work out again. And then I would have a great body then. But it's consistency that creates those things. It's consistently learning, it's consistently growing, consistently exercising, consistently being the person that we want to be that creates our life. It's our consistency, it's our habits that move us towards a destiny. And it's our lack of consistency that cause us to drift, usually towards places that we just don't want to be. So that piece of advice to teenagers today and to my 18-year-old self is be consistent. And the last piece of advice I would give myself, my 18-year-old self, is to keep moving forward. Sometimes bad things happen. And bad things happen to good people, and you're probably a good person, and I most of the time consider myself a good person. But bad things happen to good people. And a lot of times what we want to do is we just want to stop the world. Or we just want to, lick our wounds or take a break. And I understand that. I understand the need for rest, for sabbatical. I understand the need for all those things. But it's so important that we pick ourselves up and we keep moving forward. A lot of you guys watching this today will lose a job at some time in your life. Or you will try out for a team. Or you'll turn in a resume at a place that you really want to work. Or you'll put in an application at a school that you really want to go to, and you're not going to get it. And the temptation is going to be, I quit. This isn't for me. This isn't working out. But it's so important that we just keep moving forward. Not only in the big things, but in the little things too. And like I just talked about, consistency, right? That when we get up and it's dark outside and it's cold, kind of like today, and we don't feel like moving forward, we don't feel like getting up and working, we don't feel like getting up and exercising, it's so important that we learn this idea of just keeping moving forward, because otherwise what happens is we start to lose momentum in life when we don't keep moving forward. And I remember getting about halfway through my first book. I talked about this before, but halfway through my first book and really not wanting to move forward. But I'm so glad that I did, because that day when I held my book in my hand, my completed book, I was so glad that I kept moving forward. So that would be the final piece of advice that I would give teenagers, is keep moving forward. Don't let the distractions stop you. Don't get bogged down with things that don't really matter in the grand scheme of the life that you want, but instead keep moving. So that's all I've got for today. If there's something that you need help with, you'd like to see a video, go ahead and just drop it in the comments and I'll see what I can do. And also don't forget to subscribe and like this. It really helps the channel and it helps you know when I put out a new video. So I appreciate it, and we'll see you again soon.